Welcome to the Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. I'm so happy you found us. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-Fiber One News Radio, KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Good Friday morning to you. It is the Daybreak Show. Morning, Spencer.
Hey, good morning, TGIF.
Friday, a longer weekend for many folks. Memorial Day is on Monday. I saw a video of a soldier wearing a mask at Arlington, walking by the gravestones, putting down the American flags. And as we were talking yesterday, of course, a lot of our ancestors, our family trees have fought in armed service, and many of those have folks all across the country have lost family members. And yes, it's a tough holiday. If you could call it a holiday, it's a day of remembrance. Memorial Day is coming up Monday. We'll have a show for you from ABC on looking back at Memorial Day, and now with coronavirus, just one more thing to think about here. How are you doing?
Yep.
How are you doing for the day?
Doing all right. I'm glad it's Friday. It's just been a long week. Yesterday was my, right now I have kind of broken days off from my other day job, so I have Thursdays and Sundays off at the moment. So it was nice, and I probably should have gotten a lot more done than I did, but we all needed kind of a down day, so it was pretty nice. Caught up on some Supernatural episodes and made some pasta for dinner, and just kind of, lazed around a lot.
Yeah, everybody deserves one of those lazy days. Today in the news, the latest on the COVID numbers for Mason County, some more information on unemployment fraud, a look at how the early lockdown in our state may have saved some Washingtonians' lives. Tough news coming out of the city of Shelton. Law enforcement will be out this long weekend, and state GOP representatives are eyeing a special legislative session.
I'll check the weather for you. We'll have a long conversation with U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer and an update from Dr. Alex Apostle from the Shelton School District. Mason County Public Health is reporting no change in cases of COVID-19 numbers in Mason County. According to their latest release, there are 8 active cases. The total since this began is 33 positive cases of COVID-19 in Mason County. The latest case demographics are 2 females, one in their 40s, one in their 50s. Mason County Public Health is continuing contact interviews. To avoid exposure, continue to follow the guidance of washing hands frequently and thoroughly, stay home unless essential to work, and try to limit your travel to only medical appointments, medication pickup, and once every 2-week grocery shopping needs.
Imposters have used the stolen information of tens of thousands of people in our state to receive hundreds of millions of dollars in unemployment benefits. Employment Security Commissioner Susie Levine says the state is currently working with the feds, financial institutions, and the U.S. Department of Labor to investigate this fraud. Levine says that she can't release specific numbers or details while the investigation is ongoing, but more than 1.1 million folks in the state have filed for unemployment benefits since businesses started closing in March. The state has paid out nearly $3.8 billion in benefits.
Washington State's death toll from the coronavirus could be 2 to 3 times the current total. That's because some people who died of virus-like symptoms early in the outbreak were never tested. As of yesterday, at least 1,037 people in Washington state have died from the disease. Health officials have identified 3,000 deaths dating back to January 1st, 2020, that involved symptoms like pneumonia or acute respiratory syndrome, commonly associated with COVID-19. Since they occurred before the first case was identified in the state, officials are investigating those 3,000 deaths to determine whether they should be added to the state death toll.
The city of Shelton is preparing for impending revenue losses as a result of the pandemic. The city is anticipating revenue reductions in several areas, including sales and use taxes, utility tax payments, and other revenue sources. The following factors significantly limit their options when developing fiscal policy: the length of time for the city to move through the phases of reopening, lack of data to project the immediate impact on revenue, and the, of course, unknown timeline of economic recovery. They're going to continue to deliberate and be thoughtful in the use of existing fund balances. They're working through a planned conservation expense reduction process to offset estimated revenue loss. There's a hiring freeze going on now, and the city staff is only completing essential travel and training. They have identified and scheduled some checkpoints to allow incrementally reduced expenses. The strategy will ensure that the city is making decisions based on most up-to-date information available, but some of that could move to 4-day work weeks, also staffing reductions if necessary. There is a timeline and more details on our website at ifiber1newsradio.com.
The Washington State Patrol will be out in full force to ensure motorists have a safe Memorial Day weekend. Extra troopers will be on duty to strictly enforce the rules of the road. State Patrol wants to remind drivers that they will be paying particular attention to dangerous speed, distracted driving, seatbelt usage, and impaired driving violations in efforts to reduce serious injury and fatal collisions. The WSP has seen a sharp increase statewide in motorcycle fatality collisions over the last few months. Speeding was a common factor in these almost always preventable collisions. Please plan ahead and allow plenty of extra travel time. Put your electronic devices away, including your cell phones, laptops, and tablets. Most importantly, do not drive while impaired.
After being kept on the sidelines, it's time for the legislature to intervene. Tracy Ellis tells us that's the message from legislative Republicans who are now calling for a special session.
Senator John Braun says the legislature can do more to help with the response to this public health crisis and the reopening of the economy.
The legislature should be more involved, that we have an appropriate role. Certainly in the budget process, we are the branch of government responsible for budgeting.
He says now is the time to address budget shortfalls, plan for schools to open in the fall, and assist manufacturers.
We have a good understanding. We've been listening in our caucuses, and I think the other caucuses, to the people around the state of Washington, and I think we have a good sense for what's expected and what needs to be done to get us through this.
House and Senate Republicans say the emergency special session should happen next month. I'm Tracy Ellis.
Thanks, Tracy. Again today on the show, U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer, Dr. Alex Apostle, and more local news. Good Friday morning to you. The Daybreak Show rolls on.
From the iFiber One News Radio studios, you're listening to Daybreak.
Good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey and Spencer Hughes here on the Daybreak Show. Fridays, we check in with Dr. Alex Apostle from the Shelton School District. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Spencer. It's nice to be with you today.
Big week this week as you guys had your first open community forum via YouTube Live. And
Yes.
Sounds like it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, it turned out real well. Technologically, we didn't have any problems. Bob McMath from our tech department made sure that everything was working, and it went very smoothly. People asked questions, and I'm sure that as we continue our Zoom open forums, we'll get more people involved and feeling free to ask any question that they might want. But I personally thought it went very well. And we're going to continue them. Our next one is going to be on Tuesday, June 2nd at 6 o'clock from 6 to 7. And we're going to have special reports from our subcommittees that we've developed to deal with the reopening of schools whenever that may be. And so we're pretty excited about that.
Was that the majority of the questions, or what were people's, what was kind of the main themes of the questions?
Well, I can't recollect specifically, but I know we had some people that were asking about personnel types of issues, and obviously we can't get into detail on personnel situations. But there were some other questions concerning, what was it?
And just coming back, or?
Yeah, I don't think there were that many questions about that, but there were some other questions that I can't remember at this point.
It's online though. Somebody can go back and probably watch it. All right,
absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah.
YouTube link is on the school district website.
Yes.
We are starting to, in all intents and purposes here, wind down this school year. Memorial Day is Monday, and we're not in school, but it is an all-day remembrance of Memorial Day. So that is happening there as we start to wind down the year. What are some of the things that you and the school district have been looking at for ways to recognize or acknowledge? I know that you have had over the years a big it's always been a huge deal for those seniors to walk down the halls of the classrooms of the elementary schools to show those kids that they too can graduate. I mean, those are some of the main, there's used to be field days. And are you guys talking about some ways to honor this year in the way that it is?
Yes, we are. And, one of the big events in the spring, in addition to graduation and the moving on assemblies, was the most inspiring student award program. That was huge. And, it was very difficult to try to put that together with everything else that, teachers and administrators are going through. But, Marianne Marshall, who's in charge of K-12, schools, is putting together, a video. We're putting that together to honor all of our students, pre-K through 12. And that should be coming out here very shortly. I know I'm being interviewed for a spot on the video next Thursday at 10:15 by Katie Diamond, our communications specialist. And so we want to reach out to our students and to our families, giving them all the support that we can, and to recognize the fact that they've been through a lot in the last few months. And we want to wish them well, of course, in whatever endeavor our seniors are going to encounter after high school graduation, and of course honoring our kids as they move through our system. So yes, we are planning a way to honor all of our students and families.
And this year will be in everybody's memories forever, and to have those kind of positive wraps on the school year, you don't want to just kind of let it flutter away almost.
No,
you want to make sure, and we're dealing that with Kaiser and his class right now. We're trying to figure out what's, how to acknowledge, the kindergartners moving on or the first graders moving on, and everybody, especially now, I think should get that good recognition of you did good in class for 6 months or whatever, and then the last couple months you did an exceptional job. And
absolutely,
from young to seniors in high school, everybody seemed to really step up and try to become comfortable with this.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy for our students and for our families and for everybody. These are, of course, unprecedented times. At least in the last 100 years, we haven't had anything like this happen, and everybody has really had to reach deeply into themselves to continue the march forward. And we're not, even at this point in time, we're not sure what we're going to be facing, but I can tell you that as a school system and as a staff, we're going to be prepared for whatever may come down the road or any direction that the governor or the state superintendent may give us. We're going to continue to do everything possible to support everybody. And our students, of course, are a number one priority along with their families. And that's why I put together these subcommittees. And if anybody's interested in participating on these subcommittees, please let us know. And we have a number of people that have already indicated that they want to be involved, and we're reaching out to them. But I can, I'm going to put a lot of this information on our website to let people know what's going on, so that if they are in fact interested in participating on these subcommittees, they can email the subcommittee leaders and become a part of the process to reopen our schools in a very safe and effective manner.
Yeah, I took a look at the posting there that you have out, and there are good subcategories, and I think there's lots of great people in our community that would have good knowledge base on a lot of those topics. Dr. Alex Apostle, good to talk with you. Nice to hear your voice and know that you're safe and healthy during all this.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Let's check in next week.
We will.
Sounds
you take
good.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Daybreak on I-Fiber One News Radio.
Well, good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey here on the Daybreak Show and via Zoom video conference representing the 6th District of our great state of Washington, Derek Kilmer. Good morning, Derek. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you too.
Got a lot of good things to talk about here as we move through coronavirus. I saw that you, in your press releases on your website, kilmer.house.gov, have introduced bipartisan legislation, and bicameral, there are some senators that are introducing this as well. Let's talk about it. Worker access to skills training programs. This could be a big thing to get folks back to work.
Yeah, and we've obviously there's been massive economic disruption caused by this coronavirus, and there's been a lot of economists, including the chairman of the Federal Reserve, who have said that one of the big threats coming out of this is the potential of skills to atrophy. We already had some challenges in that regard with people who may have been laid off prior to this pandemic needing additional skills training, additional career development, additional whether looking to get involved in an apprenticeship or some other opportunity. And so, this is something we started taking a look at to say, okay, one of the ways that we will address unemployment, not just in the near term, but over the midterm and the long term, is to ensure that high quality training is available for people to be able to upgrade their skills and transition to new work, particularly if we may see some jobs go away that may not come back. So we've introduced a bill called the Skills Renewal Act, which would create a skills training tax credit. It would be up to $4,000 per person, and it would cover dollar for dollar the cost of training programs, whether that's an apprenticeship or a certificate program through a community college or a technical college. And it would allow for the use of distance learning programs, since obviously right now a lot of learning is happening in that way. We've talked to workforce development professionals who think this is a really important step and important tool to put into the toolbox, and I think that's why you've seen this bipartisan support for it.
What are the types of skills that you're thinking about here when it comes to these? I know we've talked over the couple of years about the backlog of work that needs to be done in our national park system, or the massive amount of infrastructure that would be a great injection into the workforce. Are those the types of jobs where you would get those skills and move into those types of professions, or is it kind of the whole gambit?
Well, your comment about the trades and infrastructure, I think, is a good example. We need more people going into the skilled trades, and we may see more people transition coming out of this pandemic, looking for a career change and potentially going into an arena like that where we have a scarcity of folks working in that. But listen, even right now in the midst of this pandemic, the one employer in our area that's not just hiring, but that's hiring a bunch, is the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. And you look at the apprenticeship programs that they run, you look at some of the requirements for certification or for industry skills that they need. That's the type of thing that you could see someone take advantage of this sort of resource, develop those sorts of skills, and hopefully be able to get into a job that helps them have a family wage.
Distance learning you mentioned, and we're still having conversations with the local school districts, North Mason School District, Shelton School District, and Mason County on ways that the future of education may face. But shifting to your profession, you in the House have recently been able to at least start looking at proxy voting for your being away from Congress. Tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's something that I will end up using, but you may see some members of Congress use it. We were mentioning before we hopped on together, I was in Washington, D.C. last week. I'll be in Washington, D.C. next week to vote on legislation. But you've got some states, some communities that are on lockdown. You've got some people who are medically fragile, and being able to continue to represent their constituents is pretty important. So the House has put in place a system of proxy voting where if someone cannot make it, there's now a process through which they can designate someone to vote on their behalf. They have to lay out very explicitly, here's how I would vote if I were there, and then have someone vote in their stead. The other big thing, and this is, I think this is really important, is that the rules also established the ability for committees to meet virtually. That's been happening in recent weeks, not really in the eye of the American people, though. So, for example, in the last month, I've probably had maybe a dozen teleconferences with the Appropriations Committee. We had a call with Secretary Mnuchin about the SBA programs that rolled out in response to the coronavirus, and a pretty bumpy rollout, right? So doing that oversight right now is really important. In fact, I would argue it's more important than ever. When a whole bunch of money is being spent really quickly, you want to make sure that there's a belt and suspenders to make sure that those dollars are spent efficiently, effectively, that there's not waste involved. I got to tell you, I was super ticked when I learned that the programs that were designated to help small businesses in Mason County were getting used by, large publicly financed companies or by the Los Angeles Lakers. I think I've shared with you before, I hate the Los Angeles Lakers. I always have. And I really hate them when I find out they're taking money that was designated for small businesses. And so that type of interaction with the Secretary of the Treasury is really important. Ideally, it would happen in a way that the American people could see it and hear it and understand what sort of oversight is occurring. So last week, the House passed a change in the rules to formally allow committees to meet via video conference. This is something that other parliaments, other state legislatures have already put in place. Frankly, I think it took Congress longer than it should have. I was pushing for this 6-8 weeks ago. But I think it's better late than never. We've actually, the committee that I chair, called the Committee on the Modernization of Congress, has actually been doing virtual meetings. They weren't official hearings because we weren't allowed to have official hearings, but we were having discussions with experts on issues that matter. Now we're able to do them, record them, and share them with C-SPAN and with the American people.
It seems that this has really shown a lot of folks that this type of communication, distance work is available. A lot of people up until a few months ago said, well, we don't have the computer system for that, or we don't have, but everybody was able to figure out how to make that work. I want to talk a little bit about the reopening of Washington State. We're starting to see different counties get different Phase 2 variances. Mason County is going to be applying for a Phase 2 opening here shortly. How are you feeling about the state reopening, and how is Washington compared to the other states? And it seems like the plan now nationally is that every governor has their idea of how things are going to be opening up.
Yeah. Well, it's been a constant conversation with the governor. To his credit, he's been in touch with the entire congressional delegation, kind of keeping us informed and taking our questions all throughout this process. I think we're on the phone with him twice a week, and we have been since the beginning of this. Obviously, this has really stunk, right? This whole process has been tough on our local employers. It's been tough on our school kids. I've got a 5th grader and an 8th grader that, my folks were both school teachers, and I always said, I don't have the patience to be a school teacher. And this last 2 months has proved it. And it's been tough on our kids. It's been tough on our teachers. It's been tough on families, and just in terms of making ends meet. And so I think everybody has a sense of impatience and a desire to see things get back and get reopened. And at the same time, people are really scared, right? People don't want to get this really awful virus. We've seen, I have friends who have gotten it, and it's really kicked the stuffing out of them. And on top of that, as much as this has really stunk to go through this over the last couple months, what would really, really stink is having to do it again, because we see a huge spike in cases. And so I think it's appropriate that the state has tried to ground all of these decisions around reopening in science and guidance from public health professionals, and trying to ensure that we're keeping folks safe and hopefully getting our economy back up and moving.
On your website, kilmer.house.gov, are ways that folks in the 6th can get in touch with you for assistance in various different ways. How have you been able to help? Do you have any stories of ways that you and your staff have been able to help constituents during this time?
Yeah, the day-to-day since this has started has been mostly finding holes in the dam, and between myself and my team, sticking fingers and toes in those holes just to try to help people. So it's been day to day in terms of helping employers that are trying to navigate. I talked to a guy a couple weeks back who said, it took me 32 years to build my business. I got a lot of families who depend on me for a paycheck, and I'm deciding right now whether or not to try to weather this storm or just fold the tent. And thankfully, you've seen a response from Congress to create some tools to help employers weather that storm, but it can be complicated to navigate that. And so part of the work we've done is to try to help local employers. And thankfully, my whole team is doing that work, and I'm doing that work too. There's a guy in my neighborhood. I was walking my dog the other night who said, Evan from your team saved my business. And he said, I was really struggling to figure out how to be eligible for this stuff, and I just sat down with your teammate, and I really owe you one. And that feels good to know that we're helping people and helping their employees, because that's my background was working in economic development. I really feel like the small businesses in our region are the backbone of our economy. I think the last time I saw you in person was at the North Mason Chamber event, and just celebrating some of the cool employers we have in our region. And we got to make sure we hold on to them and give them the support that they need. I'll give you some other examples, though, as well. So half of my team here in the district is caseworkers, where if someone has an issue with any federal agency, we work on their behalf. I just talked a week or so ago with the family that my casework team had helped. We got a call from a dad saying, my son is stuck in Peru and can't get home. And Peru's on lockdown, and we're on lockdown, and the immigration service is really complicated right now, and can you help get my kid home? And turns out we got a skillful team of people who helped helped repatriate his son back from Peru. And then sometimes it also goes into the policy side of things. And you can go all the way back to the beginning of this pandemic. Even before we had a case diagnosed in the state of Washington, I think I may have shared with you, we were talking to employers here in our region, in Mason County. We talked to shellfish growers who said, hey, this coronavirus is going to be a thing because we grow gooey duck. There's not really a domestic market for it. We want to ship it to China. All of the ports we ship into are shut down. So they were already feeling economic pain, and which is why in literally the very first coronavirus response bill, you saw the economic injury disaster loans expanded, put more money into that program, but also allowed for the first time in American history that program to be used in response to a pandemic. And that literally came from me talking to shellfish growers in Mason County and to a mill down in Grace Harbor who said, our exports are in the tank right now.
Wow.
And then I'll give you one other quick example. We were talking to some folks, as you know, our healthcare providers have not been able to provide any sort of elective procedures as we've been going through this pandemic. So, if someone needs to have their knee scoped or, any sort of optional procedure, they're kind of hosed right now. That's particularly problematic when some people use FSAs to save for those sorts of procedures, to be able to cover the copays or cover costs that may not be covered by their insurance. And those accounts have an expiration date. Those dollars that you put into an FSA or an HSA, those expire at the end of the year. Well, we've now gone through a 2-month period where people haven't been able to use that money for the most part. So literally I talked to a constituent who said, hey, this doesn't seem fair to me. And I said, boy, you're right. That's a really good point. So we wrote a bill, and it's a bipartisan bill that says, let's just provide an extra year. Let's just push out the expiration date a year for people for their savings accounts for medical procedures, so that they can use it. If they can't use it this year, they don't lose it. And interestingly enough, that bill was included in the HEROES Act, the most recent coronavirus response bill that the House has passed. So those are just a few of the things where when we hear from constituents, and literally, Jeff, I'm on the phone Yesterday, I was on the phone 14 hours between telephone calls and video conferences with our constituents who are just trying to get through what is a really, really difficult time. And part of my role and part of the role of my office is to make sure we have their back. And so that, if you're in fear of getting evicted for something that's not your fault through this coronavirus, that we have your back. If you're a school teacher, I mean, hell, we talked to folks down in Aberdeen who got pink slip because of this. So one of the things we've been working on is how do we make sure that teachers can continue to teach and students can continue to learn? Those are things that we've been working on. You and I have talked before about things like access to broadband, really important right now because, what we've learned is this isn't just about whether you can watch Tiger King on Netflix. This is, if my kid's school got closed, can they continue learning? And if my Main Street business is shut down, can I continue to operate virtually?
If you have the need, Representative Congressman Kilmer is available for your help at kilmer.house.gov. There's a lot of great resources on his website there with links to the office locations as well. Derek, it was good to see you on here, and it was really good to catch up with you on all of this. Let's think about another couple weeks down the line, and we'll do this again.
I'd love it. Thanks, and everybody stay safe.
Thanks. It's good to see you, and thank you for all you doing.
Thanks. Take care, Jeff. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. Again, I'm so happy and honored you found us and chose to listen. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of some of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-501 News Radio KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Thank you so much again, and talk with you next time.